So what we want to do is have a look at those common roles that are across the end-to-end of product management and what some of those do, how they hang together, and then just discuss them and some of the different things we take into account with those. Hopefully we'll try and answer any questions you have. Feel free to chip in whenever. This is not us talking to you. If you want to ask something, if you want to raise a point, stick your hand up, let us know, and we'll have a chat about that, but hopefully interactive. We've also split this presentation down into two, a section for this actual presentation bit, and then some reading bits afterwards with more detail about some of those roles as well, because there's a lot to get through, so we didn't want to take up time on some of that. So in terms of what we want to talk about today, so what might good look like? That is potentially a nice to have, because we know different things impact that, and we will talk about some of those. We'll also talk about what some of these roles do at a high level, and then, like I say, further down there's some of the skills involved in that, and then further down there's more detail on that later on, so you can read outside of this. The reality of this, and obviously I would like some participation there from the group, because you've all probably been there, want to discuss what that looks like, maybe in the teams you've been in, the companies you've been in, the good and bad of that, and some of those skills and things that bring those to life. And then we're going to talk about the differences between these roles with internal and external product management. They can be very different, obviously, depending on those factors. And then on top of that, the differences between enterprise companies and startup companies, because again, there can be big differences in that and the impacts of those roles. First thing, I've called it the dream team of what this might look like, and everybody may have a different view of this. This is what we've had a chat about what this might look like from sort of the top level down, some of those main roles. Obviously, depending on the size, like I said, of your company, the money that you have to put into this in terms of budgets and capacity and everything else, and what everybody else is doing, this will change, right? But these are just some of the ones we see, from that chief product officer in some of those bigger companies, your head of product who's looking after a number of different product teams. Head of IT is always there, because they make up a sizable portion of any product team in terms of the tech. We've got our stereotypical product manager, and I have given these some more humorous names along it, but just to try and convey what they actually do with this. So obviously, they have got like the juggler, right? They are always juggling priorities across an end-to-end roadmap and different requests and everything else, and who to say yes to, who to say no to from that. We have that product owner. I've seen some of those used interchangeably in different teams, but generally that day-to-day person who's trying to drive that backlog through. And you've got your tech leads and those sort of people who are trying to make sure that your product is working within the constraints of what you're meant to do as an architecture within that team and that business. And like I say, that will definitely change as those businesses scale. We have the Scrum Master now. I've seen that be terms delivery lead, and people be a project manager, but in that role, and they're sometimes very different. But obviously, the idea that's just to keep that. I mean, I've termed it the choreographer, but to keep that dance moving, keep everybody moving to one direction, and sit underneath and basically be in the background of that. Senior developers, it's those people who've done this before and how I've got there. Basically, they know what not to do. They've got all the scars about this. They've been through. They bring that experience to help those developers bring that product to life. You've got the testers who are trying to make sure we're building the right thing and building it right. Obviously, testing every square inch of that. Your business analysts. If any business analysts on there, don't be offended. I put it down as an onion peeler. That was more about the layers of an onion, right? A bit like the problem statement. You're peeling that back from that initial, the customer says they want this, to the fact you're getting towards something usable in a lot of different things and understand how all that interacts there. This is where people like Lauren from our company come in, being UX and product designer. And I term that there because I think that every time that I hand something off to her, that we build something and they get a hold of it and actually make it look and function correctly in terms of how a user wants to do it, the appeal of it and everything else. And then I've got this section on the side because we've kind of got that core team in the middle and then these supporting roles around, depending again on the size of that company, right? So and we'll get on to it later, Carl's going to talk about, but the internal versus external as well. But things like product marketing, right? If you're externally facing, it's how on earth do you go and sell that? Who is your customer segment from that? Looking at those sort of things and how you pitch that to those people who want to buy it and have that problem statement. We don't see this a lot in some organizations, but that product data analyst, so that person doing everything from looking at getting something out of there to inform insights of how we operate, how we change, how we go through that development cycle and the curve, to understanding basically, is it being used at the end of that, and have we hit our outcomes and head in the right direction of that, or is that feature that we've released not being used at all? So somebody looking into that side of things, and like I say, going full circle back into that product development and informing what we do next. And then the customer researcher, right? I've seen a couple of these in times, but when you get a good customer or basically product researcher, what they can bring to the table in terms of truly finding out what that customer wants and doing everything from those profiles to problem statements to everything else really helps product managers do their job more efficiently in this. Kyle, anything to add on this?
No, nothing there. No, all good.
Does anybody on the call, does this look familiar to some of the roles that you see in product teams you've sat in, or the companies you currently sit in, or are the things missing, or things that you would like to have in this? Go on, Danny, you can't mute. Give me it.
I think looking at this, this is a lot bigger than our current scale. And from my experience, there's a lot of blendability between the different roles and responsibilities, sometimes a 3, even a 4 in one, especially with those kind of roles that you've got on the right-hand side, the marketing, the analyst, customer research. In our organization, that all kind of sits under the product manager. So it's quite interesting to see all the different scopes available.
Yeah, and I mean, we will come on to talk about that. That is one of the things that I've experienced before as well, where you're either part of a role where you're taking on multiple roles and things like that. We will get on to how that impacts these things going forward. Like I say, this is maybe a perfect world. There's no such thing realistically in terms of how that happens. The other side is you may have a lot more developers. Some of these may be offshore, onshore. There's a real mix there to how this happens. And it depends on your product and the maturity of it as well and where it is. And like I say, the funding behind that to what you can truly afford and can you get some of these. Kyle, you're going to...
Sorry, I'm just thinking and keep going.
But no, I think it's a great call out, Danny. Anybody else? Rachel, you're sitting intently looking at this. Anything from you?
No, it's something that doesn't exist here at the moment.
No.
So I'm just keen to learn about it and understand a bit more.
And like I say, I purposely put this up to create conversation, right? It probably doesn't exist in anywhere I've seen either, right? I'm putting the sort of rules to think about, and whether that's one person or a person doing multiple roles, but that type of thing really helps develop a product. So this might be, like you say, a team of 4 or 5 people, right? In reality, because that's just the size of where you are as a business, or that's the capacity you have, or whatever else. But it's taking away what these people do, everything from that developer to, like I say, the tester, making sure that it's done right. And that things like the product owner doing that day to day, but then right up to the point of things like head of products in some of the big businesses, you've got multiple teams trying to go. If you think people like Spotify, right, they have multiple teams under that trying to build that product that we see at the end of it. How do you make sure they all hit the right time to drive that outcome forward that you want for the business and the customers? So, but yeah, this is more just to promote some thought rather than anything else. It's not saying there's a right or wrong way to this. It's just to sit and think about, if you have a gap in that customer research or product research, right? Is it actually being done? It doesn't matter who's doing, doesn't matter if you've got a standard resource doing it. Is that sort of thing being done by somebody, and are you looking into that to try and get the best out of that, to do that sort of discovery mindset feedback in? Again, product marketing, I put that in because we go and build products sometimes as product teams and product managers, but we don't really inform the people who are then going to try and sell it if you're externally facing within that organization, right? You don't give them enough time to do that. So how do we make sure those roles and responsibilities are linked together and all pulling on the same page? to the same direction. Any questions? I can't see who else has joined, how many there are. All good? Right, let's move on. We had a chat about whether we break these skills down individually under each of them. And one of the things we look at, certainly with Ascend, is trying to develop high-performing teams, right? Made a conscious decision not to go into the individual levels of these, because when you look at a team collectively, you win or lose collectively, right? So one of the things we want to look at is how you build the teams with those right skill sets. So for me, the first thing always starts with that curiosity and that mindset, right? If you're in a product team and you're not curious about the problem, or the customer itself, how are you developing the right sort of product from that? Now, I don't just want that when I'm coaching teams and when we're going into places, looking at that being one person in the team, right? As a product manager, I bring something to it, but I want somebody to challenge me going, yeah, but have you thought about this? Or actually, we need to dig into that, right? That's what I'm looking at from this, is everybody having that mindset and trying to understand more about the problem space and more about the solution and how that fits together to drive the outcome you're looking for as part of that product cycle. Being good with ambiguity, right? We still see a lot of teams and a lot of people within each of those roles that want the answer and they want to build it a certain way and they don't want to change from that. The idea, going back to that curious mindset, you want to develop this and move it on and know that what you started with might not be what you end with in terms of problem statement, which means your solution and that product feature might end up being different. Being able to deal with that and not kind of throw everything up in the air when something changes is really important in terms of skill sets within any of those roles, because I've seen it in each of those roles where people are like, oh, but this has changed now. Well, the idea is if you have constant feedback cycles in this product management space, your knowledge and understanding of the problem space will evolve, which means we should pivot to give the customer the outcome that they're looking for in terms of the problem statement that we're trying to build for, right? This is a one that, especially lately, I've been fighting a lot with different people in terms of understanding that need for data and how it drives your decision making, right? Too often I go into these teams where people have done this for a long time and they're doing it by gut feel. And I saw a quote the other day that basically said, doing it by gut feel, you'll either get lucky or you'll be wrong. And it's right that you can't prioritize, you can't build the right thing without having even the base level of data to things like the frequency of the problem, the size of the problem, the impact, the value of the customer, the cost. Take your pick of whatever that is. But using that helps you as a product team then define your backlog better and build the right things at the right time. So understand that, question the data, layering that up. I said about the onion before, right? But layering that up each time you're going down and understand more and more about that helps you build a better product for your customer and for the business direction that you're traveling in. If we look at things like a product manager, for example, people always go back to stakeholder management. But when I run a product team, I want my team to be able to talk to anybody. I don't want them to have to come through me all the time, right? Take the shortcut and stop the hierarchical chats. Like, just go and get that done. So I want people to be able to build those relationships with people, cross those boundaries and actually start talking, whether that's a customer, whether that's somebody else in the team, whether that's a senior, I don't care, but basically work on how you actually speak to people up and down across that organization and then front to back in terms of getting out towards the customer. That is vitally important to understand more about what you are trying to do. The next two are tied together, but that willingness to be wrong, right, and the willingness to fail. Too many places we go into, I think for me, yeah, they want the perfect solution, and that holds product teams back and it holds people back when they're striving for that gold-plated like outcome, which I think anybody who's been around for a while, as you do project management, that's what you're taught to do. That you get the stuff here, you build, and that's the perfect solution there. But there's no failure in that, and from failure we learn, right? If we look at things like innovation, 80% of innovation fails. It fails because we're trying to push the boundaries of things. So have that willingness to be okay with that, not chastise people, but actually support them for pushing that boundary. Kyle.
Matt, but yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I love that point, Matt. And I think I'd even take that all the way to the point where And like understanding failure is a good thing. Failure is almost the point of what you're trying to do. So
Yes.
if you think about like just the way our brains work, like your brain just comes up with assumptions, and like most of those assumptions are going to be incorrect because you're working in a complex problem space. And when we see good teams, basically they're actually just trying to fail. So you're going to do something, it'll fail, reflect on why it failed, crystallize the learning, and then start again. And you want to get the team moving through that loop. Like the faster the team can basically fail, the faster they can learn, the faster you will get to the correct answer. Because most of your ideas aren't going to work. And it's tied into actually a third point as well, man, isn't it? That, like, we just got to get the ego aside. There's no one right answer. Nobody has the answer. You're unlikely to have the answer at the start with, you know, the least of the thing you're trying to do. So we have to be comfortable with failure, and also like failure is actually part of the job, and we just got to get really good and really fast at failing, don't we?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I know people from all over here, certainly growing up in the UK through the schooling system, failure wasn't a good thing, right? We're always taught that. So it's inbuilt from the start that you need to succeed and you shouldn't fail. Yet, if you look at any of the successful companies and the entrepreneurs, they fail continuously because they're learning each time. So I think that is part of it. And like I said, the point underneath, understand it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So if you are a leader within these areas, encouraging your team to do that, creating that safe space and psychological safety for them to do that. I mean, Kyle said there, but putting the ego aside, right? Everybody in that team plays a part in product management in all of those roles. You need all of them to be a success. It's not, oh, well, I'm the top dog here and that's it. Everybody works for me. There's a whole load of stuff that I still don't know about some of these areas, which means I need better people around me to help drive that product forward as a whole, right? The critical analysis of situations, I think that ties back in with that curiosity mindset and the data-led decision making, right? Yes, we see something at the face of it, but is that truly the problem, right? If you're a BA or your PO or PM, looking at those things like your 5 whys, right? Getting to the root cause, but understand that what you see might not be the end of what it actually is. So truly, again, going deeper on that. We always talk about the customer problem statements, right? But one of the things you really need to do still be strategically aligned to the business as well. And that's where we see some fall down. And again, you will see teams where you're a product manager, product owner, whoever, and the team's trying to do one thing and you're told that your strategy is another thing, and they don't always gel, right? And that's one of the problems we see a lot when we go and work with people is how do you make that aligned while bringing in all of the insights from your customers and your problems and everything else, right? Falls onto me point after that as well. Be customer centric, right? We don't assume, we don't say, oh, well, I'm the PO, I'm the closest to the customer. Go out and find out, go out and speak to them, right? Do that research, work with the other people in the team in that discovery section and find out, right? But put them at the heart of all the decisions and then balance the other bits underneath that you have to do to bring a product alive. I said this as well about the gold-plated solutions, right? Again, I was brought up with that will do is not an option, right? Where actually in product management, sometimes a bit of that will do is better because you can get 80% the way there and get it out to your customers and start learning about how they actually use that, whether that was the problem space, everything else like that. Stop trying to build a full end-to-end solution as part of your whole run through and break this down as like mini waterfalls, basically. Get something out there, get feedback early and often, right? Try, as I say, not to be that perfectionist and just keep it there till it's absolutely perfect, because what I think my experience will tell me is it never is. And we've seen far too many clients who tell us they're busy, they put stuff out there, it's brilliant, it's perfect, it's a full integrated solution. And then the next bit is we're trying to get people to engage and adopt it because they didn't have that feedback loop, they didn't chuck a POC out there, that didn't put some sort of mock-up out there, right? Test it, get out there. It might be like the swan, right? It might look perfect on the top, and behind the scenes, you've got a whole lot of people making that work and pulling the strings. So think about that. Debate ideas, right? We talk about this in the course. Everybody should have a view of something within that, right? Like we said, those roles will have a certain area of expertise. I'm always going to need somebody else to help me get to that decision. Debate it. If you don't think something's right, don't sit there in silence, but back it up with that data point and everything else we just talked about and put that argument across in a way that's going to grab somebody saying, I don't agree with this because if we did X, it will save 30% of the time or something like that. get people to engage, and then once you're on the same level, you do it and move on. Does anybody have any questions or points about that?
I do. So in your experience, which of these skills are more important when you go into to become a strong, or not strong, but a good product manager? So I know you were saying being a perfectionist, you can be in some areas and that helps you, but you can't, bring that into every aspect of the role. So are any of these, in your experience, kind of like help you stand out more?
Should I give you the good consulting answer and say it depends?
Depends.
I think there's a book like 1 Minute Managers, and one of the things from there is it's situational leadership and dependency. So it depends on what you're doing at that time, right? I think as I've gone on, I started through a big ERP and program sort of space, right? So I probably didn't want to fail and do any of that. But as I want to be better and better as a product manager, I want to fail because I'm pushing the boundary of what people want, right? I think that for me is, if I can create that in my team of wanting to fail, I think that's one of the big ones. And then the bit about data, right? Data is the thing for me, because otherwise it's just an assumption. I've still got to test assumptions, right? But I've got no idea which one I should go after first. And that's what I'm trying to get over to teams at the minute, right? Data allows me to prioritize the high level roadmap, and then it allows me to prioritize a backlog day to day, because I'm looking at it going, well, this is bigger than that. That is small on this has a bigger win. The cost of delay is bigger on this, right? So I think that data element, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It might just be indicative of a direction, right? But it's enough to say, this market's 5 times the size of this one. They've got the same problem. I'm going to take this one first because it might drive larger revenues, give me bigger customer share, take your pick of whatever that is. I might not need much more than that. If I've got a couple of markets at the same size, I might need to go another level down and try and really understand within that customer segment within the market, what am I trying to do, right? So I think those two, pushing the boundary and failure and that innovation, right? People do innovation out there, but bring it into team, push the boundary, make sure you fail, and support people who are, and then layer it with the data so you know whether something's actually been achieved, whether it hasn't, whether you go in the right direction. I think for me, they're the biggest ones. Any other questions? This is an interactive session. I don't want to talk at you for an hour.
I think that like the willingness to be wrong and fail, like just reiterating on that of like whenever you're going through the school system, as you said, it's like failure is always seen as like a really bad thing. And it's something that I'm still working on as well. It's like it's such a hard skill to sort of overcome and like get. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the times you can get very like emotionally attached to like the product that you're working on as well, because you spend so much time on it. And it's sort of scary to pivot and change, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to do what's best for your users. And at the start, you're dealing with a lot of assumptions and everything, so it's like change and failure, like it's inevitable, and it's just sort of trying to get excited to fail rather than being scared of it.
Yeah, and I think some of it's a part of the whole, right? You need leaders all over that team to support you failing. I think one of the things I first remember Kyle like saying that stuck with me was like, it's not the person that is the failure or it's bad, it's the idea, right? And I remember you standing there saying that, and I thought it's a great way of thinking about it, right? Yes, we invest a lot in that. It's not that I'm bad at that. It's actually my idea wasn't right for the fit of that. It either wasn't the right time or anything else. But again, layer that with the data, because if you take a step back, you're going to go, actually, it didn't get anywhere near the feedback I expected from the customer based off what a test and learn card says, for example, or something like that, right? Try and be a bit more like rein it back in a bit, because it is, you get so invested, and certainly I know when you're putting the hours into God knows when, you're going, this is brilliant, then somebody rips it to pieces the next day. It does feel personal, right? But that isn't the case. It just wasn't right for the product and the people. Anybody else? I'll move on. one of the things I want to look at is just how some of these roles work together. We split this down into that discovery piece right up front. We want to constantly learn about this. You then, as you go through the product space at all levels, you need to be planning, whether that's from the CPO, head of product, down through the product manager and to the team itself. You're always planning all those different levels, right? They always interact. So again, how do you know you're doing the right thing at the right time based off customer and business priorities? How you then deliver that. And the last thing we don't always look at enough once it's been done, especially to external people, is once you've launched it, like how do you actually grow that? People just launch it, but they don't then focus enough on that end of that pipeline, right? It's like, well, I've done my job, and this is where you're trying to bring a team of people together to function more across a value stream rather than a single tower of a technical product, right? We want to spend, if we spend all that time doing discovery and think we've got the right thing, I want to make sure I've supported the people at the other end and make sure it's landed in the way it's the right customer segment we plan for everything else, right? Kyle, you're gonna.
Yeah, just on that, because I think that's really important point for a lot of organizations. When we walk in, a lot of them just don't measure, say, the speed at which they're working, so slow, and then some do, which is great. But they very often, they only measured up to the point where idea to live, and they get a thing live, as Matt says, once they have it built. Whereas really, if you think about like, why are we doing any of this? There's an outcome they're looking for. So we describe outcomes as like a change in, customer, user, or business behavior. So we're looking for some real change in behavior, and that's the outcome. So even when it gets launched, we want to measure, the principle is measure the flow work from idea to live, or from idea to outcome. So we want to stay, our job isn't done just as it's live, as Matt said. We got to then stay there, look at the data and see, are we getting the behavior change that we're after? Because you may need to run more experiments after it's live. So it's really important, that last touch,
Yeah, and I think I don't know whether it resonates with anybody else, right? But certainly my experience, and when I've gone into teams with Ascend and everything else, the thing that people normally talk to me about when they're doing product management is, oh, they've delivered every 2 weeks, right? Because they've coded every couple of days and delivered every 2 weeks. Well, they haven't, because the end-to-end's 18 months. And those people, I normally class it as like chucking it over the fence, right? Oh, well, it's done, it's live. Well, is it performing the way you are? Are we now technically supporting a whole load of intricate work that actually has no value to the business, that has to be upgraded all the time, or look for security patches, take your pick? Is the customer getting what they want from it? Is the business got value from that, right? But that's where that launch and growth certainly doesn't happen in a lot of the places I see well enough, right? And that can be internal as well, right? That's not just external. You have potentially in your own companies thousands of people sitting there using your product. Did the thing you build from that discovery where you research, and I say your researchers, remember, go back to the skills and the things involved in that role. That might be your PM, it might be your BA, right? But did your research put you in the right direction to uncover the problem, to allow you to plan it to hit the right time with things like your product owner, deliver it with your tech leads and your testers and everything else, and then put that through with either change management or you go to market and land with the outcome you expected, that you have some sort of data to say, actually, we were there or thereabouts, or by the way, we've completely missed the mark and either need to pivot or drop that. And that goes back in your whole product life cycle. But not a lot of people then certainly do that back end of it, where they will assess how well they've done or the features landed or anything else and then drop it. What they do is just chuck it out, and suddenly this product becomes bigger and bigger and grows arms and legs, and we don't really know whether it's actually any good and is driving any outcomes we look at. Does anybody have any questions on this one? Does any of this ring true to anybody's organization? Again, take away from the roles of being a specific person rather than the type of role or accountability you need in a collective team, right?
Matt, hello. Hey.
Yes. Hey.
Hello. Hello. I've got a question. So
Yes.
It's in relation to AI and how it's changing roles.
Yep.
I bet you're waiting for someone to raise this.
Yep.
So this looks pretty. I work as a contractor and I've worked across multiple organisations,
Yep.
and I've seen this both the roles that you've defined and this approach present in different forms in lots of organisations. Now, what I'm hearing is that AI is changing this structure and the way of working in terms of it's reducing. So it's increasing the time for discovery and reducing the time for implementation, because obviously you've got coding and stuff. And so what I understand is that it means that because things can be delivered more quickly, your discovery phase and your ability to ideate and define what the right thing is becomes more important, or you can deliver things quickly, so you can ideate and explore multiple different things. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so interestingly, me and Carl were actually having the AI conversation yesterday, right? I want to see AI being an enabler to this whole process, right? I think it can certainly speed us up, and we do discoveries with things like AI to try and get something out there quickly and assess that feedback. I was talking about it yesterday to Kyle about how we may use AI and structured data prompts and everything else to pull data out to help inform decision making. Certainly, it can help go and scrape a lot more data in different places. It can code. The thing I would say to that is we can be faster, and this is the challenge I put to my clients, right? Are we doing the right thing, and are we driving value to the business? And that is where I don't know that AI can truly do that bit at the minute and make some of those trade-offs. It can certainly speed up from maybe that prompt statement to chucking a whole lot of code into doing testing faster, right? Have I given it the right sequence to go through that? That's where I would still be probably trying to keep a handle on some of this. But I am loving it for things like discoveries and prototype and everything else. To, again, some of the companies we deal with being huge enterprises, they don't necessarily do that too well. It's still very structured that we know what we're going to do and that's it, right? So I think chucking AI into something like that and being able to see something rather than just talk about and bring that visualization, I think is brilliant. Obviously, things like the planning, and we did this because one of the POs that we've worked with in the past said, oh, I'd just like AI to do this. And it might in time, but again, some of that planning isn't there because the amount of business rules you'd have to put in to show the trade-offs you're trying to do. And then again, it would need the data from other places that places just aren't collecting well at the minute, right? So I think it's going to be more and more important, but it's the enabler to help drive that capacity and capacity reduction. Probably you might not need as many testers or engineers or people like that, but I think we still want that human bit on it to help critically evaluate this. And is it going the right direction? Is it suddenly spawned something we didn't want? How is it? And that, you know yourself, when you talk to somebody, you can get an idea whether there's potentially something more there or not when you talk to somebody. The expressions, especially face-to-face interviews and things like that, if somebody's looking around going, oh my God, AI doesn't pick up on that at the minute in the same way a human would. So I'm not saying AI won't really hugely impact this in the long run, right? It's developing all the time. Every day it's getting better and better, and we're finding more value out of it. But I think you'll see it come into all of this at some point. It's just how we utilize it and how fast you get onto that in some of those businesses, right? Because some of these are highly regulated businesses and it's a lot slower in that. So are you losing pace compared to competitors if you are too structured and sort of you're backing off from this potential there? But yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm really intrigued to see where it goes because, as I say, I've seen a lot where they are delivering code in a lot less time, right? I think the launch and grow will be quite interesting. Like, how do we create? I mean, I use it for one of my other businesses, right, to help me create marketing materials and other things like that, right? Do we need more of an AI expert in that to help with those like engineering prompts to get it to do the right things in places? I think that's the conversation me and Carl were having yesterday. Was if you ask it the wrong question or a vague question, you're going to get the wrong answer at the minute. I think until we as a person can structure better prompts in a different way, and I know people are doing that, I think we might not get the answer we're looking for yet, and we still have to be fully involved in that. Pi, I've just seen a question pop. Let me have a look. Yeah, I think those insights, I think it'll definitely help in that sense as well. No, completely agree with that. Anybody got any other questions on that? So I'm conscious of time as well, giving you some time.
I was just thinking there, Matt. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to add. So I was just going to say, Matt, I 100% agree with you. I think the human elements and the ability to get to making sure that we define the right thing is the most important element of it. The only other point I wanted to raise was around vibe coding. So, so in terms of, I didn't raise it earlier when you talked about roles, but I could forget who mentioned it before about sometimes you get amalgamation of different roles, and especially with ability to vibe code. I've worked with product managers who are doing development. I've worked with designers who are doing product management and also engineering, and I'm seeing a lot more of the kind of immersion of roles because of this. I'm conscious of the time, but yeah. I think
I think you bang on with that, and it allows you to potentially shrink the size of these teams in the long run, and people be multi-skilled in that. So, Kyle,
I was actually just going to say, just based off that conversation that the two of you have, and I wonder, should we do an entire session maybe on AI and product management? Because I feel like we could have a good discussion on for an hour. Because I'd love to go deeper on that, because that was the only bit I was going to add as same observation, which is just that the AI is a magnet. It'd be good to know if the community here thinks that we work well doing.
It might be a good panel discussion that we can schedule in sometime. I think possibly.
Definitely.
On that, we've just talked about obviously the people, right? This is what we've just been talking about, right? I put it in for a bit of fun, but it's people doing multiple things where we've seen it where being a PO is only like a third of their role, and they're doing God knows how many other things, or they're looking at multiple teams, right? This is the reality we normally work in, right? Where we don't have the entire budget we need, we don't have everybody, so those roles and skill sets come into somebody else, and we try and do a lot of things, but we can't necessarily do them as well as somebody who's dedicated to that. And I say that because I work with Lauren here, right? I could probably get at some point to do what Lauren does, but it would take me weeks to do what she can do in minutes and hours, because she is skilled and this is what she does. And I think that's the thing, when actually you've got dedicated people, it goes back to data, right? If that person can cycle through more and create more value in your team, they're worth the investment. And it's maybe run little experiments with that. But we've certainly seen that with people like Lauren and Renata, right? Like the value they've brought to us where they were part of our roles before. Kyle, internal versus external product, how this impacts roles. And I'll just quickly explain this like diagram on the thing, right? One of the differences I see about this is when I've done internal, I'm basically trying to fend off a whole load of people all the time, thinking that they should be at the top of the pile and doing everything else, right? When I've done external ones, I'm trying to go and find customers to engage with this, to see whether they'll talk to me about whether the product's right. And there's a bit of a difference of like, one I'm holding off and the other one I'm trying to search everywhere to get these people back in, right? So I think for me, in terms of roles, it's how you adapt and do some of that. But Kyle, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, 100%. So I think broadly in product management, actually something that's really underappreciated is actually the role of a designer, and like having a designer in a product team. I think with a lot of internal products, if you're like a product manager for an internal product, generally, it's generally some sort of large application. Think of like maybe a HR application or like a internal marketing stack application. So your users are forced to use that application. And as a result, design tends to be like undervalued. It's like very often when we go into organizations, they don't have a designer there. And so it does lead the user experience of those applications can be very clunky. And then also sort of like a monopoly, if you like, because there are no competing applications, right? The user is forced to use your one. So a lot of what you're doing as an internal product manager is dealing with stakeholders, and like you obviously still have to reach out to the users, but it can feel different. It's generally in a large enterprise, whereas for external product managers, there's two types really. There's sort of a B2B product manager, and then there's a B2C product manager. So again, with the internal one, so you have internal users that afford these applications, we talk to them. With the external ones, if it's B2B, so business to consumer or customer, you as the product manager are going to be talking to the customers, which is great, so you have direct access to them. Whereas if it's a B2B, generally, my experience is, and we could get your thoughts on that, generally you've got to go through your own organization sales and marketing teams, because they own the relationship
Yeah.
big enterprise business customer. So it can be frustrating because it's hard to actually get in front of the client. And then a lot of the time, actually, the sales and the marketing in your company, even if you're the product manager, they're actually really dictating what's on the roadmap because they're talking to their, so like think of a big company like Salesforce, their clients should be like Microsoft, Oracle, etc. And like their sales team are talking to those clients, they're feeding in almost requirements, and you can actually be on the receiving end and almost be being told what's on the roadmap. Anything to add there, Matt?
No, I think that's an absolute brilliant one. The problems I have had in bigger companies are trying to get past sales and marketing. They won't give that relationship up. They won't take you along. You're hearing it like third hand from somebody, and actually some of those sales areas have targets and different things. They focus on trying to get what will make them grow, not necessarily the full customer problem to solve it, right? So I think that's a big one, Kyle. I think that leads into the next one about things like the enterprise versus startup as well on that type of thing. And this goes back to multiple roles. And I mean, Kyle's an entrepreneur here, right? He's done this. He's started businesses. He gets this, and it's everything we're being talking about. So, Kyle.
Yeah, 100%. So if you think back to where Matt started the talk, where he showed like the dream team, and I thought it was interesting the observation that Danny made, which is that a lot of those roles are blended, because me and Matt recognize like that's sort of an archetype picture, but it's not really real. So like in large organizations, like I suppose product management, it's a very sort of undefined role, whether you're in a large organization or in a startup. But as you move from a large organization down to startup, the definition or the boundary of the roles really starts to blur. So if you think of a big organization, you're a product manager in there. Let's think of the context of the two. So in an enterprise, given the context, it's likely that the product already exists. You already have customers and there's existing channels to market. So a lot of what your brain is going to be taken up with is, actually managing your internal stakeholders inside that big organization, right? Dealing with, as Matt said, the tech teams. You're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of applications plugged into your one, everything from, data security, like your database, blah, 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 all the stuff. So you've a lot to navigate, manage in a big enterprise. Whereas if you think of the nature of a startup, think about the context, very often there actually isn't a product or there isn't customers. And so a lot of what your focus is, especially at the start, is actually trying to figure out, like, is there a problem that we can solve here? Can we actually like find some customers and sell the thing to? And as a result, I think the atmosphere in a startup will feel very existential, because your decisions like can be life or death, because you'll have some sort of a runway, 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, you have some amount of cash that you're burning through. And every decision, you also, your resources are much more constrained. So like, one of the companies I was in, there's only 5 of us in there. Really, like, there's experiments that we wanted to run, literally couldn't afford to run the ads, like, that type. So then you're going out and you're dropping the flyers, like paper flyers, trying to run the experiment that way because it's just a little bit cheaper. And so I think there's like a real sense of like existential like crisis in a startup. And then also you're doing more. So like if you imagine, say, a company, you're the product manager, a lot of what you're doing is stakeholder management. There's still quite a defined role. You probably have a reporting structure. There's things that you have to do. Again, the boundary will be blurred a little bit. But if you go down into a startup, I mean, the whole company is just one idea, one product, and the product manager, like, you're going to be doing the sales. You might be helping to build the thing. You're definitely going to be helping to test it. And so the direction that you're pulled in can be very different as well. Any other thoughts there, Matt?
No, I think that's good. And I think some of it comes on to what's on the next slide in terms of that, right? Me, Kyle, and Renata and Lauren had a good chat about this, right? And in these different size things, right? Accountability versus leadership. We are not necessarily big fans of huge races and matrix and everything else like that, right? If you've got the right leaders around that team, and I'm not on about top-down leaders, that's more of a manager to me, the leaders of every direction that get these things done, you don't need a stricter accountability for some of that. Yes, some of those roles, like I said, as Scrum Masters, keeping that whole machine moving, your PM's looking out over the strategy, your PO's looking day to day. But if you've got the right leadership, you'll find that team gels all the way, because your testers chiming up with something, your designers coming up with something. You don't need those same strict things. It's normally in the big organizations where there's multiple people in the team trying to do the same thing, that you need to look more at that accountability. We also had a chat about the seniority in the team and decision making, right, in terms of roles and responsibilities, because obviously anybody who's probably worked with product teams, there are a range of people and experience in that, and how we actually look at that in terms of decision making. Everybody in the product team has something to bring to that, and one of the things we looked at is speaking to maybe your most junior person first, because they might give you an idea that they wouldn't have if the most senior person had spoke first. They might have just gone, I agree with that. So I think looking at seniority around roles and responsibilities as well, especially if I look at now, some of the people that I've seen come through uni are already way ahead of where I probably was, because it's just normal in terms of tech now of what's expected of some people. So I think having a look at that and how you take advice from all of them, and then maybe collect a decision make with somebody that, again, we looked at things like rapid decision models and things like that, right? The other side you get in big organizations is everybody feels like they should be the decision maker, and then you end up in like meeting paralysis. And I don't know whether anybody sees that in what they do, right? But the idea is there should be maybe one decision maker in some of them. You can all feel like you want to inform somebody, but actually this person is accountable for that and that decision. The other thing I've seen in places is that's not my role, right? And it goes away from some of the things we're trying to do. There's always going to be things, and especially like we talked about, where you wear multiple hats, you're trying to help a greater good of that product and product team, right? But I have seen places, especially in the bigger organization, being like, oh, that's not my role, I'm not doing it, when a quick chat might have solved a problem. So I think trying to move away from that in terms of roles and responsibilities is quite a good one as well. And then we were chatting about how to mold the sort of right leaders and the right thinking in that team. And it goes right back to the failure and psychological safety and everything like that, right? And again, if you work with things like offshore teams, very hierarchical sometimes, how do you make it safe for those people to come and talk to you, bring ideas, go, actually, I've worked 3 other places and the better way to do it's this way. Bringing that, so if you are a product manager, product owner, whatever, you are blessed with all of these people around you and drive the experience into your decision making, and you can make better decisions from that. But yeah, I think that is one of them, because at the minute I sometimes see a lot of people in that team will just do it because they're being told, and not challenge and not bring that level of we shouldn't do it like that. And then just on this, we've talked about that, but which role, I suppose, and this is to the group, have you found to be the most valuable in the past, or in your current teams, or in your current workplace, in terms of product management? Because obviously I realize everybody will come from different places here, different experience, but what has been the most valuable to you as a person? Rachel, I'm definitely going to ask you, because I can see you contemplating this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to when we've done previous implementations of my other places, and the one that's kind of the person that's always asked the why. So I guess that might fall into the BA, maybe part of the understanding. But yeah, trying to translate their experience of processes into why the business are deciding that's the requirement that they need, instead of just accepting what they're saying. Yeah.
No, I think a lot of that, because I try and get people to spend more time in the discovery bit of it. If you can understand the problem, I've got more chance of getting the actual doing bit right. So for me, I think a BA is a big one in that. Anybody else? Can't see who else is on the call at the minute. I'll go quiet. Anybody else? Hi, you've just gone off camera as I've asked that. I've seen those.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it's so the rich organization in a variety of product focused roles is important, because in my experience, it's sometimes so the product manager have the mindset, and we are aligned with our business development department. So sometimes having more support into a big group can help to spread out these mindset into the organization. So I'm thinking more on the reality kind of things, and thinking or having the opportunity to collaborate in the product management world, have be much more out of that reality.
Yep. No, fully agree. Fully agree. I'm just conscious of time. A couple of final thoughts, and then I'll wrap some of this up, and then leave a couple minutes for questions if anybody has them. It is true this is a team sport, and like I said, it's more of a value stream than just a tech tower, right? The more you can go that way across it, the better the end-to-end product will be, and those other roles will start and come into this, right? Rather than just we develop for 2 weeks, like I said before. It is true that every role contributes, right? We want to be on board with that, with everything from OKRs to goals and strategy and visions and things like that, right? We want to move forward together. Yeah, perfect. That diverse perspectives and that debating bit that we talked about before is a skill set, right? I don't have all the answers sitting there as a product manager, head of product, right? I need the experts around me to help me make the right decisions. I know a lot of people want to try and get in this area, right? Have a look at those transferable skills and the sideways moves, and take people from different backgrounds, right? Because you've got no idea what they're going to bring to the team. And I think product teams, more than anything else, are one of them I've seen that we've had people from so many different places, and what they can bring is absolutely brilliant. So think about that. And if you're trying to get this, think about sideways moves first before maybe trying to leave and go somewhere else, because being able to get that experience and work with these teams will really help. And I definitely think the last one for me is break down those hierarchies, right? Again, I talk about ego and other things like that. I don't want to have to go through 10 people to get an answer. Just speak to somebody, or come and speak to me, or go and speak to somebody else, right? I don't worry about that. I want the right answer, and I want it as quickly as possible instead of faffing around through multiple different meetings. So yeah, I think I would leave you with that. And then one last thing, as part of us partnering with Women in Tech, we've put our product mastery pathway on Udemy. It's free for anybody in the Women in Tech. There's no charge. You just use the link in the product management community. You'll be able to get that for £0, but it's worth a look. It continues on from some of the conversations today. But yeah, go and have a look at that if you would like to know more. And then, like I said, further on from this, next session we're going to look at is in April at some point. I don't know when, because I've got a couple of holidays thanks to kids and childcare. So I'll have a look at that and let you know. But we're going to have a look at discovery mindset and starting that off about how we truly get into that. We touched on at the start in terms of skill set. So that's going to be our next follow on from this, trying to build off where we are today in terms of roles and responsibilities and everything like that. And then finally, like I said, this is the reading section. So what we're trying to do is just highlight some of what these roles do. Not everything, because it would be just a really boring thing, but just what they're accountable for. And I've tried to make sure there's one for every one of the roles I talked about there before. So if you're interested, Kevin will probably post all this afterwards. Go and have a look at that. But apart from that, that is it from me with a couple of minutes to spare. So my timing's been all right today. Anybody, any questions, any points that they want to raise? So I've got a few minutes. Silence. Has this been a useful session? Has it been a useful return for an hour spent? Yes, no?
Yes, it has. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. We are all on the community section of the website. If you need anything, drop a comment in there, tag us, ask us questions. I'll get our LinkedIn's put on there as well. Come follow us. We're here for a chat. Anything you need, again, any topics, because the one about AI, we can start and build that into things. We're trying to build this community for what you want out of it. So we're always interested in feedback and where you'd like to go with some of this. If you want to know more, we'll try and dig other things out to put on there. Keep an eye out for that community page, because we're putting sort of thoughts on from newsletters and asking questions. So get involved in that. The more we can do, the better this community will be for everybody. So yeah, with 1 minute to go, that is me done. Kyle, anything else? Lauren, Renata?
No, excellent time on that. The only thought was, I thought it was a good discussion when we the AI thing. I think I saw a couple of thumbs go up about maybe having that as one of the sessions. So I think that would be really good to look through that. Yeah, but great session. Thank you, Nash.
Perfect. If nothing else, you are all free to go. Thank you very much for turning up. It really is appreciated, and we'll keep this going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
bother. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.